Welcome to using personas to develop a product vision. Responsiveness starts by keeping the customer in mind. Brought to you by Raman Technologies. In this webinar, we'll talk about creating useful personas, we'll walk you through creation of a sample persona, and then we'll talk about applying the personas to your work. First, why use personas? You want your product to be responsive to the needs of its audience. Before you can be responsive, however, you need to begin with getting specific about who your clients are and what their need is. The persona, a concept first introduced by Alan Cooper, describes an archetypal user of a product or system. We develop personas to help us make up pretend users and design for them. A persona is a fictitious person who would interact with your product or system, and he or she is based on knowledge that you have gathered through research of actual users. Personas are a composite of details that describe actual users' behaviors and goals. Personas are active users, not passive buyers. A product or system will ideally develop about 3 main personas upon which to base their design decisions. Too many more than that may mean that your product scope is too large. When developing a product or system that will be used by actual people, it is best to design with actual people in mind. Although it would seem that a demographic study or even defined user roles would be the best way to design with the customer in mind, those methods have their shortcomings. A demographic study allows only the broadest generalizations, but doesn't describe the behaviors or lived experience of users. A demographic study tells us only what. It doesn't say how our product or system will effectively fit into the user's lives, which is the necessary focus when designing a product or system to which you want people to return. The demographic study is still useful, though, because it helps to inform us about what kinds of personas to develop. Defined user roles also seem like they would be a way to keep the customer in mind, but again, roles only give us a brief and generic description of how the person interfaces with the product or system. For example, customer could be any person or organization who does business with us. This isn't specific to the kind of customer. They could be a long-term loyal customer, a new referral, or a price shopping customer. Even these categories don't describe the rest of the long-term loyal customer's attributes or why they behave the way they do. Another reason to avoid using roles is that when they are used to design the product or system, roles can acquire flexibility, requiring a person to accommodate the product instead of the other way around, where the product is being adapted to suit the user. For example, roles can have expectations projected onto them, such as the expectations that a user will have a skill or be willing or able to acquire the new skill. A persona, on the other hand, may highlight a variety of reasons that it is unreasonable to have that expectation. Ideally, your personas are based upon research trends and patterns. It's true that the team could use this information in the format of raw data, but developing and using personas can inform and keep the team focused on how actual users behave and what their actual goals are. Raw data lacks human reliability and can lead us to an idealized or stereotyped understanding of our customer, forgetting that we want actual people, not just data points, to use what we create. As you develop your product, the persona will help you to make and justify your design decisions by helping you to understand the world from your user's perspective. If you don't have time to test your design in the real world, you can simulate a product test by assigning scenarios and personas to your team members. If a team member who is play-acting the persona has trouble with the design, there is a high probability that an actual user may have the same problem. It's recommended that you develop a provisional persona regardless of whether you plan to collect first-hand information about your target users, because you can still use this idealized exploration of your audience's mindset in order to stay focused on the human aspect of your work. Having a targeted audience in mind when you conduct your field research can help you to create good questions that will verify or falsify your current assumptions. We'll start with a basic activity that is often incorporated into larger brainstorming sessions: sticky note ideas. Sticky notes are tools that can help you with various aspects of brainstorming. Sticky notes are easily sorted in a visual manner, which is useful for finding common ground among ideas. You can substitute index cards and tape for the stickies. Ask your group to segment your user base into what they feel are the significant groups of users. There are many ways to do this, none of them wrong as long as you are able to determine users that are important to your business. Alan Cooper, the inventor of the persona, has this to say: It's less important that a persona be precise than accurate. That is, it is more important to define the persona in great and specific detail than the persona be the precisely correct one. This exercise is good for small to medium-sized groups, but not for larger groups, since this is a slower-paced activity with some turn-taking. Individuals in larger groups may get restless and bored while waiting for their turn. If you have a large group, consider breaking it up into smaller groups to run through the exercise before bringing the larger group back together. Although this exercise itself is simple, it is a great starting point for developing provisional personas. Participants use a stack of blank sticky notes to record their answers, and then after a short time, they take turns sharing their responses with the group and posting them to the wall. As participants hear other ideas, they may get more ideas and write them down. You may give each participant a set number of stickies to regulate the number of responses you receive, or you may ask participants to take turns reading their stickies one at a time. You may also split the group into smaller teams and proceed as above. You can also anonymize ideas by having the facilitator read and post the stickies. Once you have brainstormed who you believe to be your significant groups of users, you can create several individual examples of a member of those groups. The empathy map is another brainstorming technique that works for developing a provisional persona. It helps your team predict the factors that inform a particular individual's viewpoint, including your target audiences or users. This activity takes about 10 to 15 minutes and is suitable for smaller groups of 3 to 10 people. Begin developing your provisional persona by drawing a template diagram that looks like the one shown on a sheet of poster paper. Ask your group to segment your user base into what they feel are the significant groups of users. There are many ways to do this, none of them wrong, as long as you are able to determine users that are important to your business. Give your predicted user a brief outline such as their age, gender, education level, or other pertinent demographic information. Ask the group to describe the person's experiences in each category from this person's point of view. As you work through the persona, you will find that there are things that you just don't know about this person, and those questions can help inform your research. The goal of the exercise is to generate a degree of empathy for the person within the group. Ask the group to synthesize their responses. What drives this person? What do they want? What are their goals? How does this person move through life? What are they hearing, feeling, seeing, doing, and saying? What can we do for this person? The empathy map is useful for development of a provisional persona to assist with product visioning, but it can also help you to find points of leverage and improve internal processes through exploring the imagined viewpoint of any real person from the receptionist to the CFO. Your provisional persona has helped your team to identify who they imagine to be their end users and what questions they still had, helping you to focus your research. Now it's time to connect with your customers to ask those questions and put together a complete vision of your users. Data sources that can help you find the answers to those questions can include market segmentation, existing user information, call center data. Website developers can even use a tool like Google Analytics to segregate the characteristics of new versus return site visitors. If you have no existing user base, information about your competitors' customer base might also serve your needs. A warning though, don't rely solely on self-reported information. That's not necessarily representative of the full spectrum of your users' identities. Use this information to identify trends and data clusters. Those clusters indicate whom you should talk to and how many personas you should develop. You will need to gain access to 5 to 30 users for each persona type to participate in your information gathering process. If you can't find enough people from your own user base, use a recruiting agency. A small number of participants is good enough as long as the process includes some time for user observation. A large number of responses is unnecessary as this isn't intended to be statistically sound research, but it is an attempt to learn the truths and trends associated with the realities of our users' lives. Observation is a rich source of information about real-world situations our participants find themselves in, and those ideas will coalesce even in a small number of responses. The law of diminishing returns applies. Your customer interviews are valuable only as long as they continue to reveal new information. Now let's develop your questions. What you ask depends on your purpose for asking, the project's goals, and the kinds of people you are asking. By developing a script of questions instead of asking in a haphazard manner, you can establish scientific consistency that will improve your ability to make observations of patterns and trends among users. The questions you develop are not for a demographic study or even a marketing focus group. Your questions are meant to fill in the blanks about the reasons for your audience's behaviors, those attitudes and goals that can't be easily quantified but need qualitative representation. We are attempting to understand our users by identifying patterns that really drive their behaviors, not our approximation or assumptions of what their motives are. So the best questions are open-ended and not multiple choice, regardless of whether you choose to survey or interview users to collect this information. Ask your interview participants to show you what they mean, or ask them for specific stories, especially if you can't be there to observe what you want to know. To understand what you need to ask, think about any knowledge gaps you have. What information will help your team to have a common understanding of your users' needs and motives? Some questions you might ask your users. Give us a little background on your job. How and why did you take on this job? How long have you been working in this capacity? Why do you work here and not elsewhere? Tell me a bit about your industry and your role in it. What skills are required to do your job? How do you stay current and get information on your industry and profession? What are your responsibilities in your job? How do you define progress or success? How do you measure progress or success? What do you feel are the most enjoyable parts of your job? What do you value most about the work you do? Does your job provide external rewards such as perks, a bonus structure, or promotions? What are your internal motivators for doing a good job? Describe a typical workday. What do you do when you first get into the office? What do you do next? How do you do a certain task, and how long does this task typically take? Where would you start? What would you do next? And can you show me how you do that? What activities take up most of your time? What activities are most important to your success? Of the things you do during a typical workday, are any of those processes or tasks required by your company or a regulatory agency? What processes have you developed on your own and why? How have you learned to work better from your colleagues? How well is your office organized to help you accomplish your tasks or goals? Show me how you use your office to accomplish your tasks or goals. What are the most difficult, challenging, annoying, or frustrating aspects of your job? What, if anything, about your job is still on your mind at the end of a typical workday? In other words, what issues keep you up at night? What traditional, i.e. analog, tools do you use to accomplish tasks in your job? What digital tools do you use to accomplish tasks in your job? What do you need those tools to do that they don't do or don't do well? What kinds of people do well in your position and why? Describe a process and how it has or has not changed over time. Besides clients and customers, who else do you interact with in your work? Who do you report to? Who reports to you? How often do you collaborate with others, and how do you collaborate? If we came back in X number of years to have this conversation again, what would be different? If you could build your ideal experience, what would it be? Have we missed anything? Is there anything you want to tell us? Is there anything you want to ask us? Talking to your audience. Once you have your foundational work done, your participants identified, and your questions ready, you're going to want to set up the interview to work for maximum effectiveness. This includes purposefully selecting the setting and method of recording the conversation. Direct, unfiltered interaction with your participants is the best way to connect with them and gain empathy for your participants and their experience. Most of communication is not the words used or even the tone of voice, but the emotional content of a person's body language and facial expression, something that is hard to discern in any way other than personal contact. If you can't interview the participants yourself, interview someone else who has had direct interaction with them. For the optimal outcome, don't go alone. The session should have a moderator and a scribe or other method to capture the interaction without slowing down or drawing attention away from the session. A natural setting will allow you to capture natural behavior. Using a scribe to capture the session can set participants at ease since their faces and voices aren't being recorded. However, you need to ensure that you capture your interaction accurately. If your scribe is taking notes by hand, there is the possibility that something will be missed. If your scribe is typing notes, the typing may distract your interviewee, so position your scribe where that's less likely to happen. Audio recording is a minimally invasive method of backing up your note-taking, and you can share compelling audio clips with stakeholders. Just be sure that you operate ethically, informing your participants that you are recording them. To reduce liability, you can gain their verbal consent when you start the recording. Video recording is also a very useful tool, since part of the information you're attempting to capture is a larger context in which your user's experience takes place, their behaviors, the programs and forms they use, the systems and workarounds they've developed for themselves, the tools they use, how they organize their tasks. In some circumstances, it is impossible to ask questions that would yield the same depth of information as simply seeing the participant's environment. If the participant's environment is digital, using a screen and audio recording program could be the most appropriate way to record the interaction. Synthesize your data. In order to discover trends and patterns among your participants, it's important to compare only those participants who fill the same role. Within a retail business, you'd want to compare salespeople to other salespeople, not salespeople to accounting staff or management. The tasks that people perform routinely typically determine the role, not necessarily people's attitudes or behaviors. In order to compare people in the same role, you'll need to determine which attributes to use to rank or measure each participant. You may choose attributes such as how many clients a participant serves in a day, or how they make decisions, or the length of their work experience in that position. The attributes you choose to measure each participant with will help you to determine which participants can be grouped together to inform a composite persona. You'll compare your participants on those attributes in a relative, not absolute sense. Once you have identified participants that share multiple attributes in a relative way, start to group those participants. Together, their shared attributes will help you to flesh out a representative persona. To determine how many and which comparisons to make, review your interview responses to see if you can note any distinct difference in attitudes or behaviors. Between 5 to 15 factors is best. You don't want to sort too finely or you'll end up creating many case studies and not a few personas. Synthesizing your interview data into personas is much more of an art than a science. Most of the time, the patterns that you find among participants will be uneven and imperfect. If it seems that you aren't finding data trends among the comparisons you're making, try making other comparisons. The process of finding affinities among your participants may be arduous, but in the end, it will be easier to create well-crafted personas because you went through the process of getting to know your participants so intimately. Communicate personas to your team. The final product, the persona, is a single-page document that characterizes a certain segment of the user population in ways that enable a design team to have common understanding of the needs of the user. Common, average, or dominant responses or behaviors that typify the group are captured in the persona document. In its basic form, the persona document should contain each of these elements: the persona's name, demographic, a descriptive title, a photograph, a quote from your persona, a day-in-the-life narrative, and the persona's end goals. Your persona should be as human-seeming as possible, so don't use a cartoony name for your personas and avoid making other choices that turn them into a stereotype or caricature. A template developed by Christoph Zurn can help you define your core personas and sketch them out. The template is available via Creative Commons license and is also available translated into multiple languages at Christoph Zurn's Creative Companion blog. The list of sources at the end of this presentation has the website. Here are a couple of examples of personas. Keep your personas to one page each. Although you've been immersed in the inner lives of your personas for some time and can fill in many of the details of their lives, the point of developing this document is to make those inner lives accessible to the rest of your team so that they can make reasonable assumptions. You don't want to bog your team down with too many details. If there is a question about the persona's habits, the rest of your document can help them intuit the answer. Brevity is best, and a creative presentation of your personas will help keep your team engaged in and focused on the persona as a real person. Keep the personas posted visibly in your group room as a device to help the group stay focused on the human aspects of your work. The point of developing personas is to make the inner lives of users accessible to the entire team so that they can make reasonably accurate assumptions about the user's needs, goals, and desires as they work to develop a product that responds to those needs, goals, and desires. Empathy mapping was a good exercise for helping you to identify your target audience, and with a couple of changes, you can use the same technique for examining your personas in hypothetical, real-world situations. You will develop 5 exaggerated and extreme hypothetical situations for each user, in which the user has encountered their particular challenges or pain points, and present them to small teams of stakeholders, engineers, business executives, and designers. Anybody responsible for creating products that serve personas in order to have them explore the user's experience. Start by reintroducing the personas and assign one persona to each team. If there are multiples, assign the same persona to each team. Ask each team to use a sheet of poster paper to create their situational empathy map to look somewhat like this, or use the template we've developed and give each person one. Have the facilitator read each hypothetical situation you've created to your teams, using exaggerated emotional inflection in their voice to help people empathize with the user's stress. Give the teams 5 minutes to flesh out how their persona thinks or feels on the worksheet. After 5 minutes are up, ask the team to spend 5 minutes analyzing their thoughts about their persona's experience. What surprised them? What did you learn about this persona? What aspect of the persona do you want to learn more about? What aspect of the persona do you think will impact or influence your design the most? After 5 minutes have passed, ask each team to share their observations with the larger group. Thank you, and we hope this webinar has been worth your time. We hope you'll come back for the next webinar in our series, in which we explore the development of vision statements, which act as a compass to success as they help to align daily operations with your long-term strategic plans. If you'd like to offer feedback, we welcome it. Please get in touch.